Hello. It's actually like the middle of the day, but it's been raining heavily. When I look outside, it's almost like it's the evening. I'm like kind of hoping that this video is not going to turn out too dark. Okay, so today I am going to talk about some of the retellings that I've read in the past few months. I have more that I'm planning to read, but I thought maybe I'd just split it into like part 1 and part 2. Can you hear the thunder? Isn't it really loud? So, for retellings, I've read... This is a Pomelo Americano upsized. It's the size of my face. But I really like it, and I'm not sure whether I like it or I like the fact that it tastes like juice. So anyway, I'm going to talk about 2 trilogies that I've read and some standalone retellings. I didn't particularly enjoy all of them, but I thought I should talk about them anyway because if not, it's not like an accurate reflection of what I have read. So if I say like a retelling is good, it has no value unless I have read some retellings that are not so good or even like horrible, you know what I mean? So one trilogy that I read that I thought was really good was the Songs of Penelope trilogy by Claire North. Claire North is already pretty established a writer, and she writes under like several pseudonyms. The Songs of Penelope focuses on, obviously, Penelope, who is Odysseus's wife. What I liked about this trilogy is that it focuses on what life is like on Ithaca. So Ithaca is a rocky island with basically nothing much except for sheep and fish. And Penelope, she has been waiting for her husband to come home from war. We all know what he's busy doing lah, you know, having sex with other women. And he also pissed off Poseidon, which is one of the reasons given for why he hasn't been coming home. So the narrator of this story is Hera, who is technically the queen of the heavens, and she's like the goddess of marriage, goddess of wifehood. And from Hera's perspective, we can see what life is like for the average woman on this island. So it turns out this island is run entirely by its women, but the women cannot be seen to be doing the running openly because if not, it will offend the sensitive and fragile egos of the men of the island. Penelope, she is in a position where she's trying to fend off the suitors. When I say suitors, I don't mean like, you know, they love her and they woo her, but that they have assumed that Odysseus is already dead. If not, why would he be gone for so long? And so they are all vying to marry the queen, who is like old enough to be their mother, so that they can be the next king. However, in a way, like, she was put in the same situation as Helen, in that whoever she chooses to marry will not bring peace and prosperity to the island, because if she chooses one guy, then all the other guys will band together and revolt. If she doesn't choose any guy, then all of them think that she is pulling them along and that she is purposely trying to delay what should be the natural course of things. Penelope, she's put in a very difficult position wherein she has to continue to accept their advances. They come to the palace every day and they just feast at her table, and it takes a lot of money and a lot of resources to keep them fed. You know, where's the meat coming from? Where's the wine coming from? Where's the money coming from? And because she continues to feed them, all these little boys, actually, they think she must have money hidden somewhere. Odysseus must have given her money and she hid it somewhere. And if I can marry her, I can then access this money. And in which case, shouldn't this money be in the hands of the more capable men in the first place? Penelope has to play the part of the faithful wife, because the moment she doesn't, or the moment she takes a lover, the moment she decides to marry someone else, technically she is then breaking the rules that are set for her as a wife. And Telemachus, he is another problem altogether. He's grown up in the shadow of his great father. Everyone keeps talking about how good Odysseus is, and he wants a chance to prove himself, and he also wants his father to come home and be a father to him, and he also has to get along with the other people on the island. But all these other people are trying to marry his mother, and he has a feeling that everybody is looking down on him. Everybody thinks that he's hiding behind his mummy's skirts, and it makes him lash out at his mother. It makes him resent her for the kind of situation that actually his father put all of them in. What I really like about this book is how beautifully it's written. She did a lot of show not tell. If you're not used to it, you may find it a little bit slow because it's not spoon-fed to you. You need to allow yourself to like sink into the setting and sink into the narrative, and then the story unfolds itself. Another thing that I really like is that there's a lot going on behind the scenes, and if you don't pay attention to what is being said and you don't read between the lines, you are going to miss it. And then when the revelations come, you're not going to get it. So you really need to like pay attention, because Penelope and everyone else, they are following a social script. It goes against what they actually want to say or what they actually want to do. So there's a lot of double speak going on in this book, and actually for the other two books as well. She's saying one thing, but she's also saying another. And Laertes is smart. He can get what she's asking him to do or what she's telling him beneath the polite veneer of her words. All of them are playing a part, and he lets his daughter-in-law run the show because actually he respects her and he totally gets that she's doing a very, very good job. But he cannot be seen to validate his daughter-in-law like that because she's just a woman, and all the other men are not going to respect her the way he does. And for Penelope, she is also trying to look like faithful wife who is waiting for her husband to come home, and because she loves him so much, she cannot bring herself to marry somebody else. So that would be like acknowledging that he is gone and that she's available, and that goes against expectations as well. She's being confined by all these contradictory expectations of her as a wife, as a woman, as a mother, and at the same time she's just trying to keep food on the table, because who is going to do it? Not the men, for sure. So the main conflict in this book, book 1, is the suitors versus Penelope. So the suitors are trying to force her hand. One of the suitors, he has an affair with one of her maids. She's actually like a prisoner of war. She hates her position of servitude, but at the same time she also cannot put all her faith in this man that claims to plan to properly take care of her after he marries Penelope and becomes king. Isn't it more likely that he will toss her aside? She also resents Penelope, but at the same time, Penelope is kind of like the only one who is thinking about her future and thinking about taking care of her. What this suitor does is that he hires mercenaries from other islands and he gets them to attack. When that happens, either the men can take control by fighting off the bandits, or they can force Penelope into marrying somebody who will then take charge and get rid of these bandits. Penelope, she kind of knows what's going on. When she looks at the bandits and she looks at what they're wearing and she looks at the tools that they are using, she knows for sure that these people are mercenaries. And who is going to benefit from attacking this poor village or that poor village? Only the suitors. So she has it all figured out. At the same time, from one of the villages that was attacked, there was a girl who managed to run all the way to the palace. She is given into the care of another woman, also a foreigner, and she worships the virgin goddess Artemis. She comes into an uneasy agreement with Penelope that she will train the other women and other girls in the forest how to shoot and how to fight. They will be the hidden army, because there is no real army on this island, because all the men that were of fighting age were taken away to go and fight in Troy. But the men of Ithaca are never going to accept this army of girls and women. So every time a bandit falls, or when the bad people mysteriously get killed, they will say it was Artemis who protected us. I feel like I'm not doing the best job I can do about this book. As if all that is not bad enough, there is another problem. Penelope's cousin, Clytemnestra, sister of Helen of Troy, shows up on her island, and she is a fugitive because she killed her husband and now she's on the run and everybody's looking for her, and she tried to hide on her cousin's island and she thought that her cousin wasn't going to figure out, but her cousin knows every single woman in this place. Of course she's going to figure out what's going to happen. At first, she tries to hide Clytemnestra. She tries to make it look as if Clytemnestra left her island because Clytemnestra's children, Orestes and Electra, they showed up looking for their mother. In the end, Clytemnestra herself realizes and acknowledges that she has to die for there to be any kind of closure, especially if she loves her son. She willingly allows herself to be captured and killed. You'd think that that was the end of all her problems, but it's not. Because now, in Book 2, The House of Odysseus, as a result of killing his mother, Orestes seems to have gone mad. It seems as if Orestes is being haunted by the Furies, and these Furies, they are here because he killed his mother. It's going against like one of the laws set down by the gods again. But if he didn't avenge his father, he's also breaking a law laid down by the gods. A lot of these laws, they clash with each other. It's like a damned if you do and damned if you don't kind of situation. Orestes has gone mad. He is technically next in line for the throne. However, his power-hungry uncle, Menelaus, the husband of Helen, thinks that the throne should go to him because he is a grown-up and Orestes is just a little boy. What does he know about running a kingdom, etc, etc. Electra in book 1, she was quite antagonistic. She was scary. She was definitely a danger to Penelope. But in book 2, they become allies. Penelope in this book plays the role of a detective. She has to figure out what is it that is making Orestes go crazy, and she kind of narrows it down. But who is poisoning him? How are they poisoning him? Is it in his food? Is it in his drink? If it happened on the ship and it happened on the island, that means that the culprit is technically amongst them. But from the narrative point of view, it doesn't look like poison. It looks like he's being haunted by the Furies. You find out later on who it was that actually summoned the Furies out of love for Clytemnestra. I really enjoyed book 2. I was so impressed because usually book 2 of like a trilogy is when like the action dips a little bit and then it's not as good as book 1, and then you're just like, can we just get to book 3 already? I just want to finish this trilogy. But no, book 2 itself, even if it's a standalone novel, I thought that it was done very well. I thought it was done beautifully. I felt that this rendition of Penelope is my favorite interpretation of her character. And at the end of book 2, we then find out that Odysseus, he is actually coming home. Book 3, The Last Song of Penelope. So this book is told from the perspective of Athena. Athena, who is like the patron goddess of Odysseus, she shows him special attention, even though she's supposedly a virgin goddess. Make of that what you will. Odysseus has finally reached his home. He doesn't know whether or not he will be welcomed, so he decides to go home secretly. He goes to a hut behind his castle, and then when he is there, he meets his son, and then they come up with this scheme to kill all the suitors. He also meets his old nursemaid who worked for his mother, and this nursemaid, she's a bitch. That's all I can say. She is totally unappreciative of whatever Penelope has done. She's hung up on the idea that only the rightful king and the rightful prince are important, and she decides to throw the maids under the bus. She tells Odysseus that the maids have been acting dishonorably, whoring themselves out, and that Penelope is like supportive of this. So she does all this because she is a bitch. This is a fact. Maybe like he got too much sun or something, but he's not using his critical thinking, and he's like, you know, I'm just going to listen to her and I'm going to take what she says without questioning it 100%. So he comes up with a plan to kill the suitors and to kill the maids. He dresses as a beggar. He shows up at the feast. Immediately his wife recognizes him, so his disguise is not that great, you know? She doesn't really want to kick up a fuss, and she also wants to get a sensing of what kind of person he has become after these 10 years. So she doesn't out him, and she lets him carry out his plan. She figures out that her husband and her son are going to fight the suitors, so she actually helps him along by drugging the wine, making sure that there are enough weapons and there is enough armor. They burst into the hall and they kill all the suitors. It never occurred to them, why is it so easy to kill them? Why are we not facing any resistance? Why are they just dropping like flies? You know, no critical thinking, like I said. Penelope was prepared to let Odysseus back. However, Odysseus killed 3 of her maids, who she really loved. She loves her women more than anyone, possibly even more than her son. These women are her domain. These women are her charges. She takes care of them, they take care of her. Without these women, she wouldn't have been able to gather intel. These are her women, and Odysseus killed 3 of her most important women, and for the rest of the book, he needs to make it up to her. What I really liked about book 3 is that Odysseus, even though he knows that as the husband and as the man of the house and as the rightful king of this island, he has a right to do whatever he wants. He has a right to kill whoever he wants. He has a right to have sex with his wife if he wants. But one thing that Odysseus prides himself on is not being like the other guys. He doesn't want to be like Menelaus or like Agamemnon. He doesn't want to be like them. He wants to be special. He wants to be better. And so for him to be a better man, he needs to repress all these urges that were socialized into him to just take what is his, to just do what he wants. And instead he manages to regulate his emotions. He manages to make himself treat his wife with respect, apologize to her, admit that he was wrong. He doesn't just force himself on her either. He sleeps outside her door. He waits for her to invite him back into her bed, in that sense, Odysseus really was a better man than all the other men in his world. To parallel his character development, there is also Athena, like Odysseus, thinks that she is better than Hera, who is a wife, better than Aphrodite, who is involved in the carnal. Athena also needs to like work through her own repressed desires and her own relationship with her father and her siblings. I really thought that this was a very, very good trilogy. Another trilogy that I read is the Women of Troy trilogy by Pat Barker. So I thought this was like a really old series because I didn't see any like marketing for it. Then I googled it and it turns out like book 1 was written in 2018, which is very recent, right? And then book 2 was written in 2021, post-COVID, and book 3 just came out like last August, a few months ago. So I decided to give it a shot. I'm really glad I did because this was surprisingly very good. The writing itself is lyrical. This trilogy tried to tell the story from a perspective that is underexplored. The narrator of this book is Briseis. I hope I said it right. Like a minor character in the Iliad. She was given to Achilles as like a war prize. We know what that means lah, sex slave. It all like boils down to this woman. It's not even like her that they're fighting over, but they're fighting over her body. Her body becomes a site of conflict. She has no ownership whatsoever over her own body. This is one recurring thing that keeps showing up in this book, which is how little autonomy the women have because they are slaves. Like, this is a wartime situation. These are Trojan women who were taken away from Troy against their will. Princesses reduced to slaves, queens reduced to slaves, slaves reduced to, I guess, it's just another day to them. This makes this book quite painful to read. I wouldn't say that it's war porn. It's definitely not really on the same level of goriness as, say, the Poppy War trilogy, but it definitely doesn't shy away from all the atrocities that are committed against women in this Greek camp. So Briseis, she is still trying to process the murder of her entire family. Here she is, given to Achilles, and she hates him, but at the same time, she also realizes that her life now is tied to his. She's torn between her desire to hold on to her head and also her desire to just focus on survival and to learn to maybe even love him. Especially since she knows that eventually she's going to have his children. Do you then not love your child? But how can you not love your child? But how can you love your child if your child's father was the one who killed your entire family? Where does that place you? It's a very difficult position for any woman to be in. She also realizes that Achilles is actually like not the worst guy out there. In fact, as far as things go, he's a pretty good guy. The other men are definitely worse. The other men definitely treat their war slaves worse. And Patroclus treats her with kindness. So she even has a friend in this household. It doesn't change the fact that she's still unable to get over the trauma. So in book 1, the sequence of events ends with Achilles' death. Right before he dies, when he knew that he was going to die, he was given a heads up. He cared enough about Briseis to marry her off to one of his loyal supporters, Alcimus, because he knew that Alcimus was going to take care of her. And more importantly, take care of the baby in her womb. So that's book 1. And in book 2, Women of Troy, the story is on the last few months that they have in this camp before the weather becomes good enough for all of them to go home. The main antagonist in this book is Pyrrhus. So Pyrrhus is Achilles' son. Pyrrhus is the one who killed King Priam, also the one who dragged Priam's body into the camp and refuses to let anybody bury it. Pyrrhus is dealing with a lot because he didn't manage to kill Priam in an honorable way. While he did it, there were witnesses, the maids and the queen. They all saw the way that he killed Priam. He feels ashamed. He feels ashamed because he knows that he cannot match up to his great father. At the same time, he also feels like everybody is like laughing at him, and he feels that people are conspiring against him. They kind of are. It makes him very paranoid. It makes him go a little bit like cuckoo. The site of contest over here is not the women's bodies, but actually Priam's dead body. One of the maids tried to bury him, but then it was found out, and then they dug him back up. The maid buried him again. This time, Briseis found out who was the one who did it the first time, and she ended up helping bury Priam, even if it's just like one part of him. And they both got caught, and the maid got killed. and Briseis, because she's carrying Achilles' son, she doesn't get killed. On top of that, there is also the additional layer of the weather not cooperating with them. So the priest, Calchas, who is actually from Troy, he has several options. He can blame Menelaus, he can blame Pyrrhus, or he can blame Agamemnon. He has many options for who to blame. He manages to come up with a solution, which is to blame Pyrrhus. So now he needs to give Priam a proper burial, then the gods will forgive him. Or so the belief goes. So what I liked about this book is all these women, these Trojan women, these slaves and ex-princesses and ex-queens, they can't fight, but it doesn't mean that they can't resist. And at the end of the day, even though there are all these big things going on at the level of the world of men, underneath it, the women, they are living lives that are worth mentioning. Okay, book 3, The Voyage Home. Well, books 1 and 2 were told from the perspective of Briseis. Book 3 is told from the perspective of a slave called Ritsa. She became Briseis' friend, but right now she's attached to Cassandra. And Cassandra, she has already prophesied her own death, that she and Agamemnon will both die very shortly after they reach home. Obviously, nobody believes Cassandra because they think that she's just shooting her mouth off or making things up. But over time, Ritsa grows to actually care for Cassandra. So Ritsa did try to convince Cassandra that maybe you don't have to die, and even if Agamemnon doesn't die, it's okay too, because then you can live. But Cassandra, she is bent on avenging the death of her people, and that's why she very willingly and very bravely goes to her death, knowing that she's not going to come out of that bathhouse. She sees it as a necessity. I think that this book uses some very choice phrasing, which is very apt for 2024. Throughout the book, it is made very clear that he has to die. He must pay for what he has done. There is no acceptable way for him to continue living, because there would be injustice. The kind of words that were used to say were like, he killed a people. It seemed pretty obvious to me that this situation was being framed as a genocide without actually using that word. And I'm not sure if it's like an intentional thing on the author's part. So that's another trilogy. Now I'm gonna talk about the standalone novels that are also retellings. I read Phaedra by Laura Shepperson. I would say that if I didn't read other retellings before, maybe I would have enjoyed this particular one a little bit more, but unfortunately this one was not it for me. One of the reasons I felt that way was because of the writing. Maybe I'm used to more lyrical and evocative writing. I thought that maybe the plot would get better. As the novel progressed, I felt that the characterization itself was also lacking, and the world building didn't really make sense. For example, Athens is portrayed as a dangerous place where inside the castle, which is the only place where women can find gainful employment as an unmarried woman, the women there are all constantly being raped by all the men that are running around the castle. You know, I don't really get it. Athens is clearly being like portrayed as like the opposite of Crete, but I felt that this imagining of the castle itself as a place where all the women are constantly, every single day, every single night, at risk of being raped by anybody, a bit too far-fetched. I know that for this kind of like feminist retellings, they usually try to do it by highlighting the plight of women. Having a setting like that felt extremely unrealistic. So far, there have been many interpretations and many like ways of modifying this part of the story. But in this book, Hippolytus himself, he's supposed to want to honor his vows. He's portrayed as somebody who doesn't honor them. The characterization was like very inconsistent. Are you or are you not torn between your vows and your desires? So the way the story is told, also that it jumps from like character to character. So I understand the concept behind that, which is that you're trying to tell the story from many perspectives. You're trying to give a voice to the people who occupy marginal positions, like the maids or something. But in this book, what it did was that it ended up like fragmenting the narrative, and it created like a distance between the reader, for me, and the central action, which made it very difficult to fully empathize with the characters. Moving on, Clytemnestra's Bind by Susan C. Wilson. I felt that this particular retelling omitted too many things. For example, Helen and Clytemnestra, they are supposed to be princesses of Sparta. Maybe I'm wrong, but it seemed like Spartan society is very different from Greek society. Most retellings of Clytemnestra make use of the fact that she had a Spartan childhood. However, in this book, the premise of it is that these ideas of Sparta are not real, and that Clytemnestra is just an ordinary person. She has no combat skills whatsoever. She definitely needs a man to help her fight her battles. It also modified many things from the Iliad that I thought were canon. If you modify it, it kind of damages the story. For example, the reason why everybody went to war for Helen, that was also modified. I'm not sure why the author chose to change so many things and chose to make this just an ordinary story about an ordinary woman who married an ordinary man and gets trapped in a quite an ordinarily shitty marriage. Another thing that I didn't really get about this book was there was a lack of religious realism. The characters in this book, they go through the rituals, they will do things like pray, they will have ceremonies, but the characters themselves don't seem to genuinely believe or be influenced by their religious beliefs. The author seems to be relying a lot on the readers' prior knowledge of the events. Okay, now I'm gonna move on from Greek retellings and talk about other kinds of retellings. Years ago, I talked about Kaikeyi by Vaishnavi Patel. She has a new book that came out called Goddess of the River. I was really excited when I saw this book announced because I really liked her previous book. Goddess of the River is a reference to River Ganga, and the story is based on the Mahabharata, which is a religious Hindu text. The central conflict in this novel is duty versus justice. The main character is actually the son of the river Ganga. How did a river end up giving birth to a human son? Oh, it's because of a shitty man. Her son is called Bhishma for most of the book, and he's somebody who takes his duty very seriously. He'll side with his king because he believes that that is the right thing to do, that he should always side with his king. Even when it goes against the good of the people, even when it goes against common sense, he sides with his king because he believes that that is his duty. It takes him a really long time to realize that just because it's your duty doesn't mean it's right. I think if you are already familiar with the story, this is not going to be a spoiler for you, but I suspect that for many non-Hindu readers, this is like brand new, so I don't really want to spoil it for you or assume that you have prior knowledge for it. For me, as somebody who has very limited knowledge of the Mahabharata, I found it quite engaging. I like how these like old religious texts, they always get to the core of the issue, you know. It's always about people having to make very difficult decisions, trying to figure out, how do I live in this world? How do I make a right choice when it seems like every choice is going to end up hurting somebody? It also does depict the struggle of loving a family member but acknowledging that they are not good people. You can love them without enabling them. I did see a bit of critique. I like to read what other people who don't like this book say about books that I like, because I'm like that. I'm nosy. I think that not every retelling needs to be a feminist retelling. Sometimes the text just doesn't have room for that kind of interpretation. The characters for women are very limited. You're either a mother, you are a pious wife, or you are some kind of slave and you are the property of a man. The source material itself couldn't conceive women outside of these categories. You can't just invent a new category and change the source material unless you are trying to be experimental and not stay true to the source material. I do think that even though the women are very limited, it can still be considered somewhat feminist. Their suffering and the injustice that they endure is put front and center. I have two more books I want to talk about. They are similar. So the first is Lady Macbethad by Isabelle Schuyler. I don't know whether I'm pronouncing this right. Is it Macbethad? Macbethad? I'm Chinese Singaporean. I can't be expected to know everything. Okay, so this is historical fiction. There are many Lady Macbeths. This Lady Macbeth here is Gruach. I hope I said that right. She was raised by her druid of a mother, and then she was forced to convert to Christianity. But actually, like, it's just on the outside. On the inside, she has always believed in her grandmother's prophecy. She becomes like the adopted daughter of Donalda, and Donalda is Macbeth's mother. She gets married off, and then in the end, the guy that she's engaged to gets killed. She still ends up marrying Macbeth's cousin because that's the only way for her to survive at that point in time. And then Macbeth's cousin also gets killed. This woman's life is damn hard. On top of that, when she was younger, she had some kind of situationship with like a noble woman who was a little bit obsessed with her. For me, what was baffling was that this like sapphic situationship didn't really go anywhere. Another thing that I found very disturbing about this book was the official marriage ceremony needed a witness. Some guy needs to be standing there watching her have sex with her new husband for the marriage to be complete. I know Chinese people did it too. I just think it's very disturbing. That's this particular retelling. There is a more recent retelling called Lady Macbeth by Reid. She's pretty popular, I think. I've like seen her books mentioned on like book talk lists. I prefer this retelling. There are no weird voyeuristic sex scenes going on here. That's one thing. Second thing, it took the original story and then it just scattered it everywhere. This is a bit more like original and inventive. If you really wanted to follow the source material, it's a bit hard also because the source material itself is not very clear. So the main character is called Rossio. People have been saying that she's a witch, that a look from her bewitch a man. So women are obviously okay, right? They are safe from her. So she has to like wear a veil. And then when she's out in public, she has to eat with this veil on. It's very troublesome. So she marries into Macbeth's castle. He's like, you are my wife, you must know my secrets. He brings her to the basement. And then he shows her 3 laundry women who are living in a cave. They're not just laundry women. Turns out they are like the 3 witches. Whatever they prophesy, Macbeth takes extremely seriously. So when they prophesy that he's going to be king, he's like, okay, this is a sign, I must go to war now. He also needs to make his wife do some killing for him. She, whether using her magic or not, manages to get soldiers to kill their king. At this point, you don't really know whether she actually has magical powers, but I think like it's pretty clear that this is a book where magic happens. She realizes also that she's not the first Lady Macbeth, and she's also not the first woman to be used and then conveniently cast aside by this man. The 3 witches in the cave in the basement are actually Lady Macbeths at some point in time. Rossio now realizes that she is going to be next. Her husband is the kind of guy who marries women with questionable reputations, women who are rumored to be witches or women who are rumored to have powers. When he kills somebody, he puts the blame on her, she disappears. And by disappear, I mean he chains her in his basement. Instead of the mad woman in the attic, we have like the mad women in the basement. Lady Macbeth then, as a title itself, it's just a title. The woman behind that title doesn't matter. It's just a signifier for whichever woman he's planning to use at the moment. I did see somebody say that the romance was very unnecessary, but I felt it was necessary. It was there to signal her making a choice for herself. When she chose him, she's actually disavowing the ordinary world for a world of magic, a world where people can turn into dragons, where curses exist, and where she has power. Right now on my TBR, I have 4 other retellings. I think 1 might be a trilogy. I have like so many loans that I haven't gotten to. I said that I was going to reread the Dandelion Dynasty in December, and it may or may not take up my entire December. And on top of that, I also want to read the entire Tales of Earthsea by Ursula Le Guin. It might be doable if I line up my books right. That's all. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.